Good afternoon, everybody. David Korman's with us again from Korman LLP, helping us meander through this business of ours, which is called real estate, a complicated day every day. Title fraud can be a huge issue, specifically when we're dealing with people in my age group who are mortgages are sort of paid off or towards the end of the era. So yeah, it's going to be a good, exciting session, and I'm really looking forward to all the light that you shine on it, David. So over to you.
Okay, thanks, Sabiha, and always great to be with this group. And so here's a topic for today. Title fraud, and our subtitle is "What is title fraud and how to protect your home?" So when you think of your home and who this presentation is addressed to, I know I'm speaking to a bunch of active realtors, so you should for sure be thinking about this for your own home, but also your parents' home, your adult children's home, your friend's home, your cousin's home, and for sure your client's home, because we're always trying to protect our clients against title fraud. And you'll see as we work this through it that for the most part, we are. And I'm going to give you tips on how we do it and how you should do it, and who's most susceptible to fraud, and how we combat it. So it's sort of a topic that's in the news all the time, and it should be, because we're in a world where the fraudsters are always trying to stay one step ahead of the legal process and looking for new things. So it's an important topic to visit from time to time. So let's get into it. I'm going to skip over our introductory slides. I think you all know how to get a hold of me in our areas of practice. Please reach out in any of the areas, and we can act on any transaction anywhere in the province of Ontario. So please reach out. And for sure, I have to pause here and give my little commercial for David and David on Real Estate. We recorded a few sessions, episodes yesterday. We're into the 120s now with our episodes. So please tune in, listen wherever you listen to podcasts. You can watch it on our on YouTube. You could just look up Korman's YouTube channel. You could watch it. Please give some feedback to me and David. We were just talking about that this morning, that we would really appreciate your feedback as to what was good, what was bad, topics you'd like to discuss, guests you want to have on, whether you want to come on as a guest. Please let us know. We're always looking to improve and upgrade. So check us out if you haven't so far. So here's our introduction on today's topic. And as you're probably aware, you read the papers, you're involved in the industry. There's a lot of real estate fraud going on in Canada. And this isn't new. This has been going on for decades and decades, but it has been on the rise, and in particular in Ontario. And there's all kinds of frauds that go on there, because you know how easy it is for people to try and get fake ID. Those of you that have teenage children or have had teenage children, you know how easy it was for them to get fake ID when they want to go to a bar. So you can imagine what fraudsters are able to do with creating fake ID and trying to take advantage of the system. So there's been lots of media coverage around it. It seems to be stories that you hear. A lot of it's in Ontario, lots in BC, because those are the biggest, most active real estate markets in the country. So you hear a lot of stories that come out of there. And there's been some media reports that as many as 30 homes in the GTA have become targets of title fraud recently. And by recently, this seems to be, it's an ongoing occurrence. Even though there's many safeguards that I'll get into that prevent title fraud, it doesn't stop the fraudsters from trying. So we'll go through, they're going to keep trying, and we keep having to fight it and combat it and protect our friends, our family, ourselves, and our clients from becoming victims. And if they do become victims, there's ways we can get them reimbursed and covered for any frauds that occur. So for those of you that use our firm or clients that you refer to, you know that we close transactions using title insurance, and title insurance is one of the main ways that we combat fraud. We use 3 different title insurers. Predominantly, we use First Canadian Title, we use Stewart Title, we use Chicago Title. They're all very competitive. We have great relationships with all of them, and we have for a long period of time. And what's really important to us is not just helping us get our transactions closed, because there's a lot of benefits to title insurance and in just the closing process, but it's the protection that's afforded to our clients when certain things happen in the process. And one of the big ones is title fraud. And we've seen examples of them stepping up to the plate, looking to protect our clients as opposed to looking to find a way to get out of the insurance claims. And that's a key thing to the relationship that we've developed over the years with our title insurance companies. So, FCT, First Canadian Title, has estimated losses in the hundreds of millions of dollars due to title insurance. So it's like any other insurance. They're collecting premiums on every time we do a transaction, order title insurance, but eventually they pay out large sums to clients that are the victims of title frauds. So, but it's just like any other life insurance. They're collecting from a lot of people that are alive because they know that certain people are going to die. It's a numbers game, and when those people die, they have to pay out a life insurance claim. It's the same principle that works with title insurance. Now, fraudsters understand our real estate system. They understand our processes. They're sophisticated. They know what agents do. They know what brokers do. They know what the banks do. They know what the lawyers are doing, and they're always looking for a way to figure out something to their advantage to stay ahead of the system and commit some fraud. So I'm just going to go through exactly what title fraud generally is. So title fraud is just fraud that happens on real estate transactions because it affects the owner's property or title that they have to the property. And it basically involves a fraudster, like to start the process, they're basically stealing ID because they're impersonating the people that are own title. So it usually starts with that. They're trying to, by doing so, they're trying to steal the title in essence to the property by impersonating the owner. And then they're going to commit a fraud by either refinancing that property, pretending they're the owner, refinancing, and then taking off with the proceeds on a refinance, or by outright selling the property and then taking the proceeds for that. So that's basically what they're trying to do. So Government of Canada's website, we threw this in there. Title fraud happens when title to your home is stolen and the fraudster steals the home or applies for a new mortgage against it. And title fraud usually starts with identity theft, which can happen if somebody steals your personal information. It's not hard to create very accurate looking passports, driver's license, OHIP cards, other forms of ID. But that's where the process generally starts because they have to have some ID to support their claim that they are the owner, the registered title owner to real estate when they walk into a bank or they walk into a lawyer's office and pretend that they're the owner. So it's sometimes very difficult to detect. And a lot of times a considerable period of time goes by before an owner even realizes that they've been the victim of title fraud. So let's just go through how title fraud happens. It's usually a couple different ways that it happens. Usually the fraudster would register a deed to transfer the property to their name in order to sell the property, then steal the proceeds. Or they may fraudulently register a discharge of an existing mortgage and then obtain a new mortgage. So they can pretend that they're actually a bank and authorizing the registration and discharge of a mortgage and go into the system and do that. And then they go to another financial institution and they say, hey, here's a mortgage-free property. I want to borrow some money against this property. And here's the value is $1 million. And I'm not a pig. I don't need 700,000. Just give me, $250,000 on this. And the bank goes, oh yeah, lots of equity here. No problem, Mr. Owner, thinking it's the owner. And they acquiesce and provide the fraudster with the money. So I mentioned already identity theft, and it all has to start with identity theft. So the fraudster generally has to use fake ID and documents to pretend they're the true owner. And by having that fake ID and documents, they can sell or mortgage the property as if they're the true owner. Now, I've seen examples. It's not just ID, and we refer to documents. Sometimes it's a fraudulent discharge, a fraudulent transfer of title, where they show they've actually got the deed because they just print out a fraudulent title. But I've seen instances of fraud where they actually produce letterhead of law firms and they pretend they're lawyers acting on a transaction. It's not easy. I mean, it's not difficult for a fraudster to just copy somebody's letterhead and pretend that they're writing letters as a lawyer. Same thing as a mortgage broker, as a lender. So there's all kinds of documents where fraudsters can try and dupe the system. Here's a few examples just to whet your appetite a little bit. And these are all true examples and instances of fraud. Obviously, we took the names out and some of the details to protect the innocent, but just a few examples. You see the types of things that have been done. So the first one is A owns a property in Toronto, but for business reasons, he has to travel. He's out of Canada for a period of 6 months. So B, the fraudster, uses fake identity documents, driver's license, passport, credit cards, and pretends to be A, and then lists the property for sale. A comes back to Canada. He's been gone for a long time, finds out the property has been sold. He's no longer the owner. And again, this could happen 3 months, 4 months, 5 months before he even finds out about it. Second example here is A owns an investment property in Kingston, Ontario, but she lives in Toronto. And she's got a mortgage with TD Bank, and A is a busy real estate agent, maybe one that's listened to David Gorski and decided to own investment properties to supplement their income. So A's rarely gets a chance to visit the property in Kingston because she's busy in Toronto. So B, knowing that the property is vacant, fraudulently registers a discharge of the TD mortgage that was on title and obtains a new mortgage with Bank of Nova Scotia, pretending at all times to be A. After a few months, A, the owner, receives a notice from Bank of Nova Scotia, who A has never acted with, has no idea who Bank of Nova Scotia is or why they're contacted, but receives a notice from Bank of Nova Scotia saying that her monthly payments are in default and the bank's going to commence power of sale proceedings. Okay, true example. Third one here, A lists his property for lease. Okay, A owns a property, is going to lease it out to somebody. B, the fraudster, takes this opportunity to get access to the property by putting in the best offer and entering into a lease agreement with A. So now that B has access to the property, he's got the keys. He uses fake ID to represent himself as the owner and obtains a fraudulent mortgage on A's mortgage-free property. And we've seen this happen. In this example, it was to get a mortgage. We've seen a similar scenario where they've just gone in and represented that they are the owner and they just list the property for sale. Because as tenant, they've got access to the property. They can stage it. They could do showings. They've got access to the property. A, who's the actual owner, is not checking in often enough, and B can do that. So B, the fraudster, has their choice. Do I want to try and get a mortgage on this, or do I just want to sell the property because I've got control of it? I got the keys, I got access, and so there's the opportunity. So what happens? What are the consequences when a title fraud does happen? So there's a few things that could be consequences of a title fraud. So the number one thing, the homeowner may not have title to the property at all. They paid for their property. They might be mortgage free. They may have paid for it all, or they paid, their equity is in there. There may have been a mortgage on there that now maybe it got paid off, but their equity is gone. They don't have title. They're not entitled. They're not registered. It's not part of their assets at all. So the homeowner would have to try to prove in court that a fraud occurred and restore their title. They may or may not get it back, because the fraudster may not be caught. Fraudster may have sold this property to some bona fide, innocent third-party purchaser who buys the property, gets a mortgage from a mortgage lender, uses the money to pay the fraudster. Fraudster leaves, they move in, they're living there, it's their money, and now the original homeowner shows up and says, hey, what's going on here? I want the house back. Well, you've got a purchaser that just bought that house in good faith and paid for it. So there's competing interests that can't always be resolved easily. And it's a very significant court process to go through, and all through the evidence and everything, to see who might be entitled. But somebody's going to lose big time in this, and everybody's going to lose just by paying legal fees. So another consequence is a fraudulent mortgage could register the property, and now the homeowner still owns the property. They didn't know that their old TD mortgage for $200,000 got paid out and discharged, and they now have a property that has a $600,000 mortgage with Bank of Nova Scotia. It's their property. Bank of Nova Scotia advanced funds on this. They've registered a mortgage on it. They want mortgage payments to be paid. They want to be paid off when the property is sold, or they're going to sell it under power of sale. There's competing interests. Just to continue on this, some other consequences of title fraud. The homeowner is left vulnerable to claims by the new mortgagee, like Bank of Nova Scotia in the example I just gave, for the mortgage fraudulently obtained by the fraudster, and the old mortgagee whose mortgage was fraudulently discharged. The homeowner can be entangled in litigation commenced by a buyer who innocently had no knowledge of the fraud. They moved in, they paid good value, they paid fair market, they bona fide got a mortgage, they handed over the funds, they're living there, they're an innocent party. They didn't know there was a fraud being committed. They had no reason to know. And obviously this affects the homeowner's credit, because there's non-payment of a mortgage. There might be outstanding utility bills, equipment rentals, property taxes. The list can go on and on with these potential consequences. So when we started, Sabiha mentioned herself as a potential person at risk to a fraudster. I want to just outline who the targets generally are and why they're the most at risk in these different categories. So the first one is owners of property that are mortgage free, because the fraudsters are always looking. The registry system we have, anybody can search title and see is a property encumbered with mortgages, or is it mortgage free? So mortgage free properties are at increased risk, because fraudsters don't have to deal with a lender. They're not dealing with discharging money. They can go to any lender and say, hey, I'm the owner, I'm impersonating the owner, I'm the owner of this property, it's worth $1 million, it's free and clear. It minimizes them getting caught. And that's why I say they're usually not pigs about it. They're not saying, I have $1 million property, I know I can apply and get a 70% to value mortgage or a 65% to value mortgage. I don't really need 650,000. I don't need 700,000. I don't want to be a pig. I'm just going to ask for $200,000, $300,000. So the lender will be very comfortable. There's lots of equity here. If there's a default, the lender could always sell the property, get their money back, and there's no big risk to the lender. So that's why mortgage-free properties are usually the biggest targets for a fraudster. It's just the easiest process, because they don't have to impersonate. They don't have to deal with a discharge of an existing mortgage first, or a refinance on an existing mortgage to then get the new mortgage. They can skip all that. And it's easy to apply for a very safe amount that a lender will be comfortable with, without going into great detail on it, and looking at whether they can afford to make the payments, and because there's so much equity left in the property. The second category of people that are at risk are properties that are generally unoccupied or vacant properties. And fraudsters are looking for this all the time. It gives them greater flexibility to get access to the property. whether they use scenario that I talked about before, where they sign a lease and that just gives them the keys to the property, or it could be them just, going in, changing locks, getting control of locks, and because it's vacant, people aren't attending, so it's not that difficult sometimes to do that and just change the locks, and then they can let anybody in they want. They've got the keys that way. So if you've got a vacant property, unoccupied property, you're going to be a greater target. It's easier for a fraudster to go even to a real estate agent and say, hey, I own this property. You want to come see my property? I want to know what's worth. I'm considering leasing. I'm considering selling it, and they start the process. And the third category, and Sabia, with all due respect, I don't think you quite fit this category yet. It's property owned by the elderly. And fraudsters target properties owned by elderly. First of all, there's an increased possibility that there is no mortgage debt. Okay, the mortgage has been paid off or it's been paid down considerably. And the fact is, our system changed in 1985. Prior to that, we weren't putting dates of birth on title with the homeowner's name. From 1985 on, that became a requirement. We're transferring title, we're identifying people by name and by their birth date. So it's easy for fraudster to see, but look at birth dates, they can see the age of the parties for any transfers they're looking at that are post 1985. So it's but that's who they're going to target. They can use, and with elderly, once that's a target, they can use forged power of attorney documents. We see that all the time. Okay, because they can show someone, oh yeah, the registered owner is 90 years old, and here's the power. They can't handle their affairs, but they've given me, the fraudster, power of attorney to deal with this property, to refinance this property, or to sell this property. So all they got to do is create a fraudulent power of attorney document, and they dupe the real estate agent, they could dupe the mortgage broker, they could dupe the lender, they could dupe the lawyer. Here's the fraudulent power of attorney, and I have the authority to sell this property. And we sell it or refinance it. Here's the bank account that was opened up. I used the power of attorney. I have to open up this bank account, but it's really an account that the fraudster has, and it's got nothing to do with the account that the 90-year-old homeowner had. So those are the general high risk people. Okay, if anybody or if you're in any of those categories, you're more at risk than others. So just moving on here, wanted to talk a little bit about why title fraud is on the rise, because you think it would be going down with all the safeguards that we've got in there, but it's there's still lots and lots of instances of title fraud going on, and it's still considered to be on the rise. And there's a few reasons why. Fraudsters use the best
David, maybe can I just interject for a quick second? Last few months, I've actually come across three different cases where through a divorce, um, there has been one of the spouses has tried to do this. So just being realtors, I think, there's one aspect of this training which is for us and our family members, but the due diligence that you need to do when you're dealing with, what David said, just people calling you into the houses and saying, okay, I have a property and I want to put it on the market. Be very, very sure that you make sure you go on Geo Warehouse, you check the title and stuff just before even listing the property. I think that's a very important thing that realtors need to keep in mind when we're doing so.
Yeah. Thanks, Sabia. So here's some reasons why there's been an increase in title fraud in recent years. And a lot of it deals with the technologies. And these are technologies that we all like, that have all improved our lives as lawyers, as real estate agents, as lenders, as brokers. There's a lot of technologies in the system that help us do our job and help us do it more efficiently, but it's also created more opportunities for fraudsters in some ways. So like with the pandemic that we had in 2020, that sort of pushed the technologies and the use of technologies a little bit faster. And there's so many real estate services that are offered virtually, which makes it easier to impersonate owners than it was before when you're face to face with people. So almost every step in the transaction now has technologies um, that create these virtual type systems, from signing the way you guys have your clients sign documents, to the system that we use to meet with clients to before we close transactions and get them signed through video conferencing. We're not face to face the same way. We're not examining ID the same way. Now, I can just let you know, just from our point of view in the legal system, there was new legislation introduced that came into effect January 1st of this year that sort of upped the way lawyers have to verify ID. And the title insurers are a part of the system, the lenders are part of the system, the lawyers are part of the system. So it's a more complicated system to verify ID, which is good. It's because there's been so many attempts to use fake ID, and it's easier to try and use fake ID when you're not face to face and physically seeing the ID in your hand and being able to hold it up and look at people and see whether the ID actually looks proper. So, we're all using government issued ID. It's driver's license, it's passports, and and the fraudsters, like I said before, are really good at making fake IDs. So we all have to be very careful with it. So that's what they're doing, and impersonating people that way and just using the technology to their advantage. There's still some benefit to be able to look people in the eye and see the real passport in hand, and as opposed to just getting a picture of it. But that's why there's different processes that are always being developed, and it certainly happened in our industry to provide certain safeguards against it. But that's one of the reasons why it's been on the rise. So Sippy already touched a little bit on methods to protect against title fraud, some things that we have to do. So I want to just go through 5 different categories of steps that the way you can the way that all of us collectively are trying to work to protect against title fraud. So it's title insurance, which I mentioned before, I'll go through it again, obtaining a mortgage on title, protecting your personal information, regularly checking for suspicious activities, and searching your title periodically. And some of that might sound a little strange to you, but I'm going to break it down a little further one by one. So the first one, and I still think is the most important one, is title insurance. Okay, it's the most important tool to protect against title fraud. In our office, those of you that have done transactions with us or have referred your clients to us, you know that we will not close a residential real estate transaction without obtaining a title insurance policy for the clients. And there's many reasons for it. But the main one is, first of all, it enhances the process. It allows us to close on time, or give a better chance of closing on time and dealing with issues that come up before closing when title insurance is involved. So, and we've done other seminars and webinars for your office before just on title insurance and the benefits. So I'm not going to go into all the detail, but that's one of it. But when you do have title insurance, in addition to help the closing process, you get fraud protection going forward. And you're not paying annually for that fraud protection. You pay for a title insurance policy one time when the transaction's closed, and an owner will get their title insurance policy, and they will have protection going forward. It doesn't matter if they own the property for a year or 20 years or longer. If they have a title insurance policy and at some point during the course of their ownership, they're a victim of fraud, they're going to have protection from the title insurer. So it's critical, and that's why it does not make sense. We can close transactions without title insurance. There are real estate lawyers that close transactions without title insurance. We won't do it because we're not acting in the best interests of our client and giving the best protection. And it's not more expensive to close with title insurance in many instances. It usually comes out to something really close, because when you don't have title insurance, you're spending the money that you would have spent on the policy to do certain searches and due diligence that you don't have to do if you have title insurance. So the title insurance company is basically saying, instead of you giving the city or the municipality money to do certain searches, give us the money, give us a policy premium, and we'll protect you. So if any of those issues do come up, we'll give you protection. And by the way, you also get fraud protection going forward. So to me and to our thinking in our office, it just does not make sense to not have title insurance. It's the number one protection against fraud. Okay. So it's not a requirement in Ontario to have title insurance. Okay. But we won't do it in our office if someone doesn't want it. We'll try and convince them, and most times they do. We don't lose people generally. Usually we convince them why they should get title insurance and have the protection. And we go through that explanation that I just gave you. Okay. So, and we're not the only ones. Like, the good lawyers in Ontario are pushing title insurance. And there's even a statistic in here that 90% of residential real estate transactions are title insured, and they should be. Why the other 5% aren't is beyond me. Now, just let you know, when we're doing a commercial transaction, we don't always get title insurance. We look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I can tell you it's been a long time since we've decided in consultation with our client not to get title insurance on a commercial transaction. Usually there's enough benefits to get it on commercial transactions as well. The lenders are generally more comfortable with it too. So usually most of the time we're doing it on commercial transactions, but we're giving it some thought each time on a commercial transaction. We're not giving it thought on a residential transaction. It should be every single time. Okay, and it's the lawyer that's acting on the transaction that arranges for title insurance. And we're usually picking for our client, for the most part, which title insurer to use. They're competitive. There's different reasons why we might go to one as opposed to another on a transaction. It's not generally price driven on a residential. They're all very competitive in the way they do it. There's slight differences in the policies, but usually not very significant. But it's usually the lawyer that makes all the arrangement for the policy, and it's very, hands off by the client. They'll receive the policy, they'll get an explanation of what it covers, what it doesn't cover, and they've got that as their protection. And we're doing it if it's a mortgage transaction, if there is lending on it, then it's really two policies that get issued. One is the homeowner policy, and one is a policy for the lender to protect them, because they can be victims of fraud as well, as I've mentioned, and their mortgage may get fraudulently discharged. They get protection with a policy issued to them as well, and that's always paid for by the homeowner, never by the lender, because lenders don't have to pay for things. They pass that cost on. But it's something that the lawyers will arrange in the normal course in a transaction. Okay, so there's a homeowner's policy, and then there's the lender's policy. And not only will these policies fix issues that go wrong and protect for fraud going forward, but it also covers legal expenses that get incurred if there is an issue. So it includes coverage for the legal costs of getting things fixed up as well. Okay. Other benefits, I want to move on, but just, one of the big benefits we get from title insurance is property taxes. Because when we have title insurance, we don't have to get certified information from the city. We can rely on what the seller is saying. Yeah, this is what my taxes were last year. This is how much I paid. And we can close based on that. If it turns out they were lying knowingly or unknowingly and more were owed, we'd write a letter. If they don't pay it, we just hand it over to the title insurance company. Title insurance company will pay the outstanding taxes, protect the owner for it, and then they'll try and chase the seller. And same thing, happens with outstanding work orders, zoning violations. We hand it over to the title insurance company. You go fix it up at your expense and protect the homeowner. Now, the second category of ways to protect is to obtain a mortgage. And here we're telling you, get a mortgage even if you don't need a mortgage. Okay, and it's counterintuitive. You're finally mortgage free. You've been working all your life to pay down your mortgage. You're mortgage free on your property. You've discharged your mortgage. You're so happy. And here David Korman is telling you you should get a mortgage registered on your property. And it's purely to protect yourself for title fraud. So you don't have to draw money on it. You can go to a bank and set up like a homeowner's line of equity, line of credit type of facility that would allow you to borrow against title to your property. And let's say your property is $1 million now mortgage free. You could put a mortgage on for 700,000. You might be able to register it for $1 million, but you don't owe the bank money just because you've registered a mortgage on title. You only owe the lender some money if they actually advance money to you. So if you've never drawn it, never have any money advanced to you, you don't owe the lender anything, but you've got a mortgage sitting on your title. So if a fraudster comes along and happens to check your title, they see, oh, there's a property, we think it's worth about $1 million, but there's a $700,000 mortgage that's registered on title. Let's go commit fraud against somebody else. Okay. And this is an important thing for people, again, anybody mortgage-free, elderly, or in those categories, it's definitely something to consider. So yes, there's a cost because you got to register a mortgage. Eventually, if you sell that property, we're gonna write a letter to that lender to give us a mortgage discharge statement, and the lender's going to say, well, there's zero money owed. No monies were advanced, but we have to charge you an administration fee to provide a discharge. So there are some minimal costs involved, but it's minimal, and you get protection. You just make yourself a lesser target to a fraudster because you've got a mortgage registered on title. So to do that type of thing, you're generally looking at those home equity line of credit type of things where you're not paying any interest on it unless you actually want to borrow money or advance money. And usually it's revolving. You can borrow against it if you want. You pay it back whenever you want, or you never use it if you don't need it. But it just gives you a layer of protection. Let them go target somebody else. Third method of protection is protecting your personal information. Because remember, this whole fraud starts with impersonation, and they need your ID. They need to create some ID. They need personal information, birth dates, addresses, full names, in order to create these false IDs and false documents. So one way to protect against fraud, important way, is just protect your personal information, where you store it, who has access to it, things like that. So we encourage you to do that. Fourth method is regularly checking for suspicious activities. Do regular checks online for any fraudulent sales, leases, listings of your property, things like that. Now, this is something that people generally don't want to do, but you could certainly do it and check on your property, especially if you're going to be an absentee type of owner of a property, an investment property, or you own a property that's in another city. You want to check in on it. Don't be so much of an absentee owner. Set up a Google alert for any new search that might result from your property address. Take a look at your credit report once in a while, because you might have a great credit report and all of a sudden you don't, because somebody borrowed money against it and maybe defaulted against that loan if it was a fraudster. Not only usually what a fraudster will do is they'll borrow money fraudulently. Let's say they refinance a property or put a mortgage on a mortgage-free property, and they'll usually make the first 1 or 2 or 3 payments. So, and they'll use the money that they borrowed, that they actually theoretically borrowed from the bank. They actually stole it from the bank, but they'll use that advance of money to make the first few mortgage payments until they're safely out of town to cover their tracks. So months can go by without anybody realizing that there was actually a fraud. So, but eventually there'll be a default and something that could affect your credit. The fifth method is to search title periodically, which is also something that generally people don't do. People don't think of it. You live in your house. You may have been there for a long time. You might plan on being there for a long time. You're not in the process of refinancing. And even when your mortgage does come due, so you're just filling out documents with the bank that just extend the mortgage in certain terms. There's no new registration going on title because you're just extending the terms of your mortgage with off-title communication between you and your lender. So maybe nobody's checked your title or looked at your title for 5 years, 10 years, who knows how long. And if you actually did a search of your title, you'd find out there's all kinds of things that could have been registered without you knowing it. So one of the tips you could do is periodically search your title and see if there's what's registered, any mortgages that went on or went off, or things like that. It's not something that people normally do, and the fraudsters know it. So that's why they're targeting properties where there's no activity on title. There hasn't been activity, mortgage-free properties, or properties that even had a mortgage, but it may have been registered 10 years ago and nothing's happened since then because as the mortgage came due, there wasn't a need to register a new mortgage. The mortgage terms just got extended without things going on title. So nobody's looked at the title to the property. So that's a good method. Once in a while, take a look at that. You could just do a sub search of title. Some additional steps. We put a list of some other things you could do that help owners avoid title fraud. Carefully screen, interview, and assess tenants and short-term renters before providing access to the property. If you are an absentee owner or going to be away for a period of time, get somebody to house sit your property while you're away. Show that there's some activity there, that it doesn't look like a vacant property. Put in the lights that go on and off on timers. Make it look like there's action there. Have someone check in on it periodically. That always helps. And there's lots of ways using technology by these home monitoring systems, cameras, lights that go on automatically, doorbell cameras, things like that. Use the technology, especially if you're an absent owner. And a lot of this, by the way, some of you, might have just cottage properties that are seasonal, or you don't get to once in a while, or maybe you get there all the time in the summer, but you're not there that much in the winter months, or you're up once a month in the months. Get someone to check on the property, put in surveillance equipment, put in monitors, get some lights going on and off, periodically, so it doesn't look like the property is vacant all the time. Be careful when you're doing a transaction and be cautious. Sometimes if a deal is too good to be true, there's usually something wrong. So if a property's up for lease and a tenant's offering $3,000 a month because they really want this place badly, when the rest of the world knows they should be offering $2,000 a month and that's fair market, why is this potential tenant so desperate to get access to this property? If it's too good, be suspicious about it, because it might be they just want to get it. They're happy to pay that extra $1,000 for a month or two because they're going to use that time to give access to the property and have agents come in and sell the property and market or refinance the property because they got the keys. Be wary of unsolicited phone calls, emails, letters asking for personal information. Protect your personal information the best way you can. Make sure you've got proper antivirus software and keep current with that on your phone, your computer, any other places that you store your personal information. They're always trying to hack in and get that personal information. So I'm going to end up here and then take some questions. So going forward, there's some things that you should keep in mind. Okay. Nobody wants to be a victim of title fraud, even if down the road you've got if you have a title insurance policy, that's great. Okay, because that's going to limit any loss, but there's stress that still goes around. It's way better to try and prevent you being the victim, but if you're going to be the victim, hopefully you've got title insurance to help you through the process. And when I say you, I'm talking obviously about anybody and clients, etc., as well. So we want to do whatever we can to prevent ourselves being targets, but none of it's foolproof. It doesn't eliminate the possibility, but it might reduce you as being the target, reduce the risk. That's the best we can do. So that's what we want. We should all try to do that. So we want to just do whatever we can, whatever's available. And there's always something new to add to the list. But like I mentioned this year, there's a new identity verification system that's come into play. And that's going to help reduce the risk because there's a few parts to it and there's additional questions that have to be asked and more ID that's necessary in the way the ID is presented. So there's always an upgrade along those lines. So that's an improvement this year. I'm sure the fraudsters might catch up to what's being done this year, and 3 years from now, we'll be doing something different because the system will have to evolve. We want the public to be aware of the possibility of title fraud. We want real estate professionals to use the best technologies that help avoid frauds, whether it's in signing documents, whether it's in video conferencing, whatever it is. There are systems, some are better than others, some have evolved more than others, that help avoid instances of fraud. Land registry offices and financial institutions should consider sending alerts to homeowners for any new activity with regards to their property. That'd be great if they communicate and find the right way to communicate, and they have up-to-date email addresses or phone numbers. So make sure they have that, so they're communicating with you and not with a fraudster, and you provide alerts. We want stricter measures to catch and penalize any perpetrators. So it's an ongoing process. We're trying to stay ahead of the fraudsters, and with all these efforts, and there's a lot of efforts and a lot of great technology in play right now, and a lot of protections, but yet I go back to what we started with, that it's still on the rise. There's still all kinds of instances and new horror stories to be told about it. But all we could do is keep fighting the battle. Reduce your chance and your client's chance of being the target. That's the main thing. And make sure when they do have a transaction that they get title insurance to give them that fraud protection. So if they are victimized, at least they're going to get paid back. Because there's a insurance money to pay them, to protect them, to make them whole. And then it's up to the title insurers to go chase down and see if they can collect some of that money back if they actually catch a fraudster and there's still money available to it. But at least there's protection for the owner. So with that, I'm going to throw it back to you, Sabiha. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat or anybody wants to ask a question. And you can always reach out to me directly if anybody doesn't want to do it in this forum.
Yeah, I mean, Karen Watita had mentioned, so a line of credit would work instead of a mortgage as well. And I
Yes.
responded to it that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and basically the difference, if you're getting a conventional mortgage, you're applying for a mortgage and you're asking the bank to advance you a certain amount of money for it. With a line of credit, you don't have to get any money advanced unless you ask for it, but it can just be registered and it's available there in case you do want it, but you can never use it if you don't want it.
Right. I mean, I know that the topic was title fraud, and it's this is not exactly title fraud that I'm mentioning, but what David was saying, the importance of actually having title insurance, and how his firm never closes a property or tries never to close a property without that in place. I've had this instance with myself where certain things that were in the APS were actually not included in the house. And I was able to get, whatever was the rightful amount to be paid off towards whatever was missing. It was a brand new house and it was missing part of the furnace. They were rented whereas in the APS I had put down that the furnace, air conditioning, it was included in the purchase price. It was included in the chattels list. So just for you guys to know that it goes from title insurance is helping us from a very small thing that might be missing to actually the full title of the property, but all of that is also included in the coverage, whatever's in the APS as well.
Yeah, just remembered another point that I should just let you know of. Title insurance has been around in Ontario for over 30 years now, give or take. I remember the very first meeting that we had. I was at a firm downtown, and we had a partners meeting one day because we had this guy coming in that worked for First Canadian Title. They were the first title insurer to come into Ontario, and he was going to come speak to the partners about title insurance. And we were a real estate boutique firm. We did, lending on behalf of trust companies, banks. We acted for developers. We did a lot of commercial work, not a lot of residential at the time. And I remember we had this meeting and we got, we're in a boardroom, all our partners are there, and the guy walks out, and our collective wisdom was, nah, title insurance, it's like, it's a fad. It's like the hula hoop. It's not gonna make it in Ontario. It's not gonna change the way we practice. In the meantime, it came into the province. It changed the way every real estate lawyer practices, residential and commercial. It's here to stay. It's not going away. But there's been a huge benefit to it. Not well, partly on the closing process, but a huge benefit because of the fraud protection that it does provide. So there are properties out there that people bought before title insurance came into the province, or before, like I said, 95% of the more recent transactions are using it, but there's still some that didn't. So I would encourage you, if you know anybody um, that may not have had title insurance when they acquired their property, they should look into that. And anybody that doesn't have title insurance, especially if they are on a mortgage-free property, they should get a title insurance policy. And we help clients do that all the time. So even though they're not buying the property now, they've owned it for 30 years, but it's their property, you can still buy a title insurance policy that'll give you protection going forward against title insurance. So that's one way you could do it. So you could put a mortgage on, so you're not as big a target, but you could also actually buy title insurance. So if they do target you, you're protected. And I would encourage people to do both. The cost is not significant either for getting a line of credit, a HELOC or something like that registered on title, and it's not significant to get a homeowner's policy. And you've got that peace of mind, you got that protection, and the title insurance company it's basically getting a subsearch of title to see what's there, and they issue, and they want to know the value of the property. They look at a property tax bill to figure out the value, and they issue a policy. And you should know that the way title insurance is charged, it's their fees are generally based, or it's always based on the value of the property. They have a scale, so they want to know what the value of the fair market value of the property, and they will issue a policy based on that value. So it's a sliding scale. So you're going to pay usually twice as much for $1 million property as you would for a $500,000 property in terms of title insurance. But it's not exorbitant, and it's one-time payment, and it's great protection to have.
I think David Irvin has a question. Or Irvin, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. I sent it earlier, but when these frauds are being committed, they're really being it's the bank that's being duped, isn't it? The bank's issue as opposed to the homeowner?
Well, sometimes it's both. For sure, if the bank could be duped and they're advancing funds, but there's a mortgage sitting on title that the homeowner's now responsible for. They thought they had a mortgage with TD for 200,000. Now they got a mortgage on their title that's 600,000 in favor of Bank of Nova Scotia. So the Bank of Nova Scotia, hopefully, when the lawyer that acted and put that mortgage on arranged for a title insurance policy, a lender policy for Bank of Nova Scotia, and hopefully the homeowner also has a homeowner policy from when they originally bought the property, because the title insurance companies will protect both of them separately, but through their own policies, that way.
Right. I guess my question is if it's just a case where, say, it was a mortgage free home, and these fraudsters impersonate and they take out the 300,000, like you say, and they just make off with the money. Isn't the point there that the bank were the ones that were deceived and didn't, I guess, do enough due diligence? Why is it now on the shoulders of the homeowner? Like, shouldn't the bank just bear that responsibility? They're the ones that, filled out the applications and approved them and advanced the funds.
Yeah, no, you're right that they're the ones that were duped in that scenario, but it's still a problem that the homeowner's got to deal with because there's still a mortgage for a large amount registered on title to their property.
I
So
got that,
if there's title insurance,
yeah,
the answer to your solution is going to be, if the lender had title insurance, they're going to get their money back from the title insurance, and the homeowner is not going to incur a cost. Okay, in that scenario,
right.
it works out perfectly. Okay, but what if they didn't? What if they didn't just refinance the property?
Exactly.
Irwin, and they stole the ID, and then instead they decided to sell the property. Okay. The homeowner wouldn't have any coverage for that. The property's been sold out from under them, and they don't have coverage for that because they don't have a title insurance policy. They're on
Yeah.
their own.
Yeah, I got that. I guess I'm just at the first stage of it. Even if that homeowner with the paid off house didn't have title insurance, shouldn't the bank be reimbursing that homeowner? If it
No.
didn't go any further, they didn't
No.
sell it or anything. They just took the 300,000 because they got it from the bank, and the current homeowner doesn't have title insurance. Wouldn't that be the bank's responsibility to
No, the bank's
rectify
not going to be responsible to the homeowner that way. But the bank
title?
hopefully has title insurance, so they're going to get paid back through their title insurance.
Okay.
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 If they get paid back, the owner doesn't have a problem anymore.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, the original bank, let's say that scenario, TD Bank, there was a TD Bank $200,000 mortgage. Fraudster goes and gets a $600,000 mortgage from Bank of Nova Scotia. They use the first 200,000 of that to pay off TD. So TD's mortgage is now gone. There's a $600,000 mortgage. The lender, it's obviously fraud. The lender applies their title insurance, says, hey, we're out 600,000, give it back. The owner wants to give it back. Title insurance company pays them back. Homeowner now doesn't have a mortgage on their property.
Right.
Because TD got paid out and Bank of Nova Scotia got paid out. But somebody's going to want to collect back and put at least the $200,000 mortgage back on title.
Yeah, just like a quick story, I had a huge credit card bill that was paid off because I have a prepayment on my credit card, and I looked into it, and there was 3 different payments to Cathay Pacific paid out of my credit card over a period. It started with $18, went up to $19,000. So, I mean, this happens all the time. And when I called up TD the very next day when I realized this had happened, they were like, yeah, it's going to take us 30 days to make sure it wasn't you. And I was like, okay. So I went to Loblaws the same day in Toronto, but I also bought these in Shanghai. Like, how's that even possible, right? But it's not right away that they give your money back, and it's there. I mean, it's on their thing. I should turn around and tell them that, well, it's not a safe card for me to keep, but it's always on the consumer, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I can't remember the last day that went by where I didn't have some attempt to commit a fraud on me. Like, how many of you look at your phone, you got a text message. I think I had a few yesterday that your parcel hasn't been delivered, like they're pretending they're FedEx or they're Amazon. Your parcel hasn't been delivered because there's an outstanding amount in your account and you got to pay $20. It's not $100,000. It's pay $20 or pay something here, pay this so that we can deliver it or something. There's a shortfall in your Netflix payment. We didn't receive all the money this month. Like, just blatant fraudulent attempts. And sometimes they're asking for small amounts of money, which are tempting. I just give them the $20 and get rid of it. But what they really want is the information by the method that you're going to pay them the $20, because they're into your phone if you answer them, and then they're looking for the way you're sending them the money through your phone, and good luck if you do it. So you got to be very careful. If it looks like spam, if it looks like it, don't open it, don't answer it. If it's something real, it's CRA or whatever, they'll find a way to get a hold of you in a real method. And just be careful. It's constant. I don't know about all you guys, but it's daily. It's more than once a day that I get these types of things.
Right. So, David, I know we're out of time, but Malik had a long time ago, like, raised his hand, but not then he left away. So,
Okay.
Malik, are you there? Are you able to ask your question?
Yes, I still have a question, if it's possible, I can ask.
Sure.
Yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm not sure. Usually, you answered that early because I got a phone call in between. So for a while I was away. The question I have is for the title insurance. Let's say someone sells the property, fraudulently sells the property, and owner is unaware, and the buyer buys the property, and the seller has the title insurance, and on the other hand, the buyer has the title insurance. So how they're going to work it out, like who going to get paid, who is going to be a loser, or whether or not both are going to be protected? That's my question.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, but that's up to the insurance companies to duke it out and figure out, who's going to be responsible for what, because each one has to protect their own client. And it's just like you get in a car accident and and both parties have insurance and they're obligated to protect their own insured, but the insurance companies will have their own fight to figure out who's paying for what and who's responsible. So the good news is it won't be the homeowner that has to worry about it. They'll get paid back, and then it's up to the insurance company to see what opportunities they have to collect some of their money back. And it might be because they catch a fraudster who's got some money, or it might be they're collecting it from another insurance company because there was other coverage available. So, I don't really know how they work that out because it's never been my concern. My concern is, is our client made whole? Did they get reimbursed? Great. Good luck to the insurance companies. They'll figure out, how if they can recover it from another insurance company.
So the second part of my question is that what if the new buyer take the possession while the first owner was away in absence? So he comes back and he finds the new owner is already taking the possession. So what's going to happen at that point? Will the previous owner can enforce the entry, or how that'll work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it works differently in different fact situations because when you think of it, you've got two innocent homeowners involved there. You've got the original owner who just happened to be away and he's a victim of fraud, but now you got somebody else who's moved into their house and paid real money through a real process, did their closing, got a real mortgage from somebody, they moved in. So they can't both live there. Someone's gonna have to live there. So it's got to be sorted out one way or the other, and someone's going to be moving out, and someone's going to get reimbursed. And it really depends on the fact situation and everything at the time, but it will be worked out eventually as to who like sometimes it goes back to the original homeowner, and but if the homeowner was never really living there and it was vacant, somebody else moved in, then they may allow the new person to live there, but just make sure that the original homeowner is reimbursed for everything and is made whole and gets all the money they would have got if they had just sold it to that homeowner.
And if the buyers can the existing homeowner can buy the title insurance at any point of time, or it has to be done during the transaction?
No, they can buy it at any point in time. So if they didn't buy title insurance at the time they acquired the property, they can still apply and get title insurance. And it's not going to protect for anything that happened before they bought the title insurance policy, but it'll protect them for things that happen after they bought the title insurance policy.
Thanks, David.
Okay.
I think I have Abu's hand up, but I don't know how much time you have left, David, because you've gone over at 3 o'clock.
David, I know we do this title insurance in the province of Ontario and all, but I had an experience of buying a property in the province of Quebec, and there, unlike the way we have the lawyers here, like buyer side lawyers, seller side lawyers and all, there they have this thing called notary. And when we're buying a property in Quebec, it turned out that I asked them specifically during the signing process that where is the title insurance? I need a title insurance, and they told that we don't do it here. So what would be kind of like course of action here, like where in the province itself the notaries are saying that we don't do title insurance? How do we protect ourselves as an owner of those kind of properties in the provinces where title insurance is not in practice?
Yeah, great question, but I don't think I can really answer it because we're not allowed to practice in the province of Ontario. Their system's completely different than our system. So I don't know what they do in terms of title insurance in Quebec. The only province I'm a little bit familiar with how they do it is BC, because their system is very similar to the Ontario system. But I couldn't tell you from province to province exactly the differences, because it's different in every province. But in particular, the whole system is different in Quebec. The title insurance system in the US is completely different than the title insurance system here. You close transactions differently. And by the way, I say US in broad brush, but it's different from state to state. But almost all of them use title insurance, but it's different than what it's done here. The title insurance is actually part of the closing system. And sometimes the due diligence is done after parties already have closed and taken possession, and it's a whole different system. So there's no reason to get into all that. So anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying I don't know the answer to your question, because unfortunately I don't deal with stuff in Quebec. You have to go to a local, you have to get that information from a notary or a lawyer licensed to practice in the province of Quebec.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone, especially David. And I look forward to seeing everybody on the 1st of February for our gala. And definitely we'll miss you, David, but we're glad that Jonathan will be there signing away his book. I'm going to be sending a message regarding that soon. And Taimur, I think, is also joining.
Yes.
So I look forward to your team being there. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry that I won't be there, but congratulations to everybody in advance that's getting an award, and I wish everybody the best of success to get the next award you're seeking in 2024. There is a market out there. Get out there. There are transactions happening, and it will improve even in the spring. So thanks everybody for joining. And then Sabiha, we got another one scheduled, I think, in a few weeks, and Sabiha
Yes.
I think it's on everybody's calendars for February, March. So,
That's right. Yeah.
okay. Thanks,
All right.
Sabiha.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.